And I would suggest this to you, as you learn, start small. Start small. I mean, I don't want to make mistakes in front of an audience this large. You know, with thousands of people, I don't want to do that. Let me learn where there are 2 or 3 gathered in His name. I mean, if you got to make a mistake, you better make it in a small, intimate setting. Make it at home with your family instead of getting out in front of, you don't want to be in front of the stadium with 53,000 folks, you know, and then make your mistake there. Get your mistake made on the smaller area. Figure that out while they're small, in a small environment. I mean, if you're going to learn a lesson, learn your lesson baking cupcakes instead of making a sheet cake that feed 50 people. You done wasted a lot of flour and sugar and eggs. Get the formula right. If you can't make a cupcake, forget it. Try something else. But as you learn, start small. Now listen, starting small is not the same as thinking small. Starting small is not the same as thinking small. You start small. It's smart to start small because you've got a learning curve that you've got to deal with. And if you do it big the first go round, you're going to waste money. And you're going to do things that are not the wisest way to do it. Start small is not the same as thinking small. You do this first, and then, but you're thinking big at the same time. I'm a big thinker, but I'm starting small. I'm doing this right here, but I'm going to be in front of the stadium. Start there, start small, but think big. Start small, but think big. Because it's so much better to learn from small mistakes than big mistakes. And the initial learning has to do with identity. Your initial learning, it has to do with identity. It has to do with identity. And why is identity so important? It is because the who determines the what. The who determines the what. If you go into a party, people want to know who's going to be there. Who is the band? The who determines the what. The quality of who's going to be there will determine the quality of the event that's going to happen. That's why people want to know the who's going to be there, who's on the lineup, who's starring in it. They want to know the who because the who determines the what. If somebody gives you an assignment to do, what you can do is determined by who's on the team. When you build the dream team, the who determines the what. The who determines the what. I want you to notice Matthew chapter 16, verse 13 through 17 in the New Living Translation. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." And then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus replied, "You're blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being." See, he said flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you. But see, this was an identity. You got to know who the Lord is to you. Psalm 107 and verse 103 and verse 7 says that he made known his ways to Moses, his acts to the children of Israel. This is speaking of God. God made known his ways to Moses. Moses understood God's ways. The children of Israel, the masses, they only saw his acts. In other words, Moses had an understanding of God's character. The other people only saw his acts, the deeds that came out of God. And so that's a total different way. But we learn God through intimately walking with him. When you walk with God in prayer, when you walk with God in your daily life, you begin to learn the character of God. God made known his ways to Moses, but his acts to the children of Israel. The children of Israel saw his acts, but Moses understood that the reason that God is sending food to rebellious people is because God is love. He has an unfailing mercy and love. He's not feeding these hard-headed folks that keep disobeying him just because they deserve it. It's because he is good, not because they are good. Moses understood that. These people were too ungrateful to even look up and thank God for the food that was coming down. They were grumbling and saying, "Lord, I'm tired of eating this." When you don't have anything else to eat, you don't have the right to complain from somebody that's feeding you. And you would starve to death otherwise. He's sending you bread from heaven and you complaining, "I'm tired, I'm sick of this stuff." Ain't you got anything else up there? Murmuring, complaining against God? I would have struck them dead. But See, Moses understood God's ways. It was the compassion of God. God didn't want to destroy his people. He wanted to have mercy on them. He loved them. That's his nature. That's the heart of God. That's God's heart. And God made known his ways unto Moses, his acts to the children of Israel. And so I'm so grateful. Here's the next question. After you know who God is, the next question is, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Socrates said, know thyself. Know thyself. You see, because we can't know who we are without God. You know why? Because we are hidden with God in Christ. We are hidden with him. And until you understand him, you don't even understand who you are. Until you understand God, you don't understand what potential you're capable of. And see, here's the deal. God cannot bless who you pretend to be. God cannot bless who you pretend to be. That's why there must be an authenticity. Remember, you learn, do, and then teach. You learn, do, and then teach. When you teach stuff that you've not done yourself, that's called hypocrisy. It's very simple. It's very simple. And then people lose respect of you because you are teaching stuff that you haven't done yourself. You learn, do, and then teach. Jesus began both to do and to teach what he had already learned from his Father. He learned it, he did it, then he taught it in that order. It is the cycle of victory. You learn it, you do it, then you teach it. You learn it, you do it, then you teach it. You learn it, you do it, then you teach it. It's the cycle of victory, the cycle of victory. And so, listen, don't just take this thing and say, you know, well, I'm just going to do me. This is who I am. No, no, no. Invest in yourself. Don't use that as an excuse not to change. Invest in you so that you can be better than what you originally were. Invest in you, invest in you, invest in you. I love something that Isaac Asimov said. He said the saddest aspect of life right now is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. Science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. But now here's the next thing, is that after you learn something, you're obligated to do something. After you learn something, you are obligated to do something. You're obligated to do something. Luke chapter 12, verse 48 in the New Living Translation says this, but someone who does not know and then does something wrong will be punished only lightly. But when someone has been given much, much will be required in return. And when someone has been entrusted with much, even more will be required. Here's that principle. To whom much is given, much is required. And this is why after you learn something, you're obligated to do something. Because once you learn something, now you have more. Once you learn something, when you learn more, you can earn more. Once you learn something, you're obligated to do something because now more has been given to you. And more is required from those to whom much has been given. It's interesting. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. Notice these words. You have heard me teach things that have been confirmed by many reliable witnesses. Now teach these truths to other trustworthy people who will be able to pass them on to others. This is the Apostle Paul writing to Timothy, telling him, he says, what you've seen and heard in me, what you've learned from me, do them and teach these to other folks. Find faithful people and teach it to them who will be able to teach others also. Learn, do, teach. Learn, do, teach. Learn, do, teach. People say a lot, so watch what they do. Watch what they do. Doing is another level of learning. Doing is another level of learning. And just remember, failure is normal to doing. It is very normal. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid that if you don't get it right, that somebody's going to laugh at you and it's going to be a big mess. Most successful people have failed a number of times, not just 1 or 2, 7 or 8 times. The average successful person has failed at least 7 times. You'll be surprised. Don't give up on yourself just because you've fallen. How many children learn to walk without falling many times? It's a part of learning how to walk. Falling is a part of learning how to walk. This is not an excuse now. You don't need to be, grown now. Well, unless you've had some kind of illness that you're recovering from. You need to learn that while you're in the fundamental stages. But you often learn by doing and failing, and doing and failing, and doing and failing, and doing and failing till you finally succeed. You know, the man that was working for 3M that makes all kinds of paper and glue and all kinds of office things. And he had made some glue that was supposed to be a strong glue, and he was just disgusted that the stuff failed because he could stick it on stuff and this stuff you just peel right off. And another guy who worked, another scientist who worked for them, remembered that guy had that failure with that product. And he said, let me go and get some of that. Mopped it on some paper, bam, Post-it notes. And it had a function. But had this man not failed, he used somebody else's failure to make something else succeed. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised of how that happened, of how it happened. Sometimes some of the greatest inventions happen almost by accident, just out of a failure, out of a failure. They were making ivory soap and they left the vat mixer on too long. Stuff got all light and fluffy, and that's why if you drop ivory in some water today, it floats. They actually figured something out by an accident that happened. It's an accident that actually led them into it. You'd be surprised. But the point is, don't be afraid to fail. You try something, you do it again. If it doesn't work, you do it again. You make some alteration. Think, idea, try, do it again and again. Keep doing it. You know, and then you finally come to that place. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time. I love something that Dr. Steve Maraboli said. He said, every step towards your dream today is a step away from your regret tomorrow. Every step towards your dream today is a step away from your regret tomorrow. And here's a principle that I want you to get. Doing builds strength. Doing builds strength. It builds strength. I have never met a strong person who had an easy past. If you ever find a strong man, he's been through something. If you find a strong woman, she's been through something. I've never met a strong man or woman who had an easy past. So there is a reason that struggle has been a part of your journey. There's a reason that struggle has been a part of your journey. I love something that Lilias Trotter said. She said, measure thy life by loss, not by gain. Not by the wine drunk, but by the wine poured forth. And this is the line that I love. She said, for love's strength standeth in love's sacrifice. Love's strength stands in love's sacrifice. And then she said, and he who suffers most has most to give. He who suffers most has most to give. Jesus suffered the most for us. He had the most to give for us. He who suffers most has most to give. Unmerited suffering is redemptive. It gives you something. And I'm so glad, this whole doing thing, you learn and you do. When you do, you know what the do is another way to translate that word do, is let your light shine. Let your light so shine that men would see. See, not hear, see. See. They need to see. They can only see what you're doing. They don't see what you say. They see what you do. Let your light shine. It is simply saying that what you've learned from me, do it. Put it into action. Let your light shine. And here's the thing that I've discovered is that people who let their light shine do not have a need nor a desire for the spotlight. If your light is shining, why am I trying to get in the light? I am the light. Jesus, when he was here, said, I'm the light of the world. But when he left, he was saying, you are the light of the world, and you are the salt of the earth. Let your light shine. Why are you trying to get in a spotlight? Let your light shine. You be the spotlight and shine into other dark situations in the lives of other people. I want you to see something that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 18 and 19. He says, for truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them, not teaches them, does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever does them and and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever does them and teaches, does them and teaches, does them and teaches will become great. And so you learn to do things by doing. You learn to do by doing. You learn to do by doing. Just launch out and do something. You know the reason that I say just launch out and do something is because if you launch out and do something, you can correct something, but you can't correct nothing. And if you got writer's block and you're just stuck with a blank screen, just start writing something. Even if it's wrong, at least now you got something down that you can correct and make better. And that's how you do. You go through several edits. That's why nobody ever writes a masterpiece of a play or a movie the first go round. You do a rough draft, and then you come back and you make changes and improvements, and you're adding stuff here and you're taking this out. You're editing. You are a work in progress. Nobody creates the masterpiece. It has to be edited. So just start somewhere. You have writer's block. You'll be frozen, stuck in the place where you are. God says, for God's sake, do something. You know why? Psalm 1 says, He'll bless whatever you do. You got to be rooted and grounded, planted like a tree by the rivers of water, and whatsoever He doeth shall prosper. Whatever you do will prosper. Not what you think, not what you say, what you do, not even what you pray. Whatever you do will prosper. That's why you have to learn it, do it. Learn it, do it, learn it, do it. There's a power in the doing that builds a strength. Just get busy with it. Start it, even if it's not perfect, even if it has mistakes, because at least now you've got something down that you can correct. You've got something down that you can correct. Just start the plans. Now you can make them more realistic, but just get it written. Just put an outline down. Just put some ideas. Now you can organize them and put some better things down that make better sense, but just get the process started and then start correcting it. Write and correct. Put it on paper and correct. Edit. Make it better and better and better and better. See what's wrong with it, but you can't even see what's wrong with it until you put it down. That's why just get started. Do something, because you can always correct something, but you cannot correct nothing. Here's Joshua chapter 1 verse 8, and God was speaking to Joshua. He says, this book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Notice, be careful to do. Meditate, learn this so you can do it. Learn it so you can do it. Meditate on it day and night so that you can observe to do it. Not so you can be a spiritual egghead. Meditate on this so you can learn it to do it. 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 And I love something that James Freeman said. He said, to live is to change, that nothing alive stands still, that a tree may rest in winter, but only gathers strength to grow again in spring. But please understand this, that teaching is a process. Teaching is the process of repetition until learning occurs. It is a process of repetition until learning occurs. When you're working with children, you have to use repetition. You have to use repetition. I can't tell you the number of times that my daddy said stuff over and over, and he wore us out. He wore us out. He was always teaching us. He wore us out. But Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 6 through 9, the New Living Translation says this, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Commit yourself wholeheartedly means learn them. Commit yourself wholeheartedly means learning them. Learn it. And then he says, verse 7, repeat them again and again to your children. Notice that. Repeat them again and again to your children. How many of you know when you have children, they don't listen the first time? Repeat them again and again to your children. Teaching is a process of repetition until learning occurs. That you got to say it until they can finish your words for you. They're like, I know, I've already heard it. Teaching is a process of repetition until learning occurs. Notice he says, talk to them, repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road and when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Does that sound like that's a little repetition to you? Did I say that you're supposed to teach it again and again? I mean, when you go to bed, when you get up, when you're riding on the road, he says whenever you have an opportunity to teach it, drill it in again. You put the nail here, and every time that you speak it, you're hammering that thing in more, hammering it in and hammering it in and hammering it in. Because some of our children have some sort of firm You know, some of their skulls are really... So you have to say it a few times. Anybody who's an employer, your employees don't get it the first time that you say it. You can have it in writing. It said, did you not see this in our manuals? Did you see that this is in violation of our protocol here? You're in violation of policy? It's already in the policy. You got to say it again and again. Do you think that people get it when you tell them one time? No. Teaching is the process of repetition until learning occurs. And so he says, repeat it. Notice, I want to back up to verse 7 again. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road and when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them on your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminder. Put them in visible places, on your refrigerator, on your mirror. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Put them there where you know that they put them on their computer screen. Tape it to their cell phone. They'll see it. Put it on the refrigerator. Let them see it. And just teach it. Just pound it in over and over. You're not trying to be a nuisance to them. You're trying to teach. It's the process of repetition until learning occurs. George Bernard Shaw said this, that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. You assume that because you told somebody something, you think they got it. It's the illusion. The biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Because you know you told them. But people don't hear what you say, they interpret what you say. And that's why you got to say it and say it and say it. And as you're teaching, here are some questions that you need to ask to ensure that understanding is occurring. Here's some questions. When you're teaching people, if you're on the job, if you're teaching somebody a process, here's some questions that you need to ask. Why do we do it this way? Why do we do it this way? What would happen if you skipped this step? What would happen if you skipped this step? Can you imagine if you're teaching somebody how to make a cake, give them a formula for cooking or making a product, and you skip a step? What would happen if you skip this step? Now, this is how you teach. You have to ask questions. Why do people sometimes overlook that detail? Why do some people overlook that detail? How much time should you expect to spend on this step? Because when folks are working for you, you don't want them to take all day. How much time should we spend on this step? And what would you do if you got stuck on this step? What's the plan if you get stuck on this step? And then here's another question. How do you know when the task is complete and when you are meeting the standards? How do you know when you finish? How do you know when this is up to par? Because when people patronize your business, they want a certain level of consistency. They don't need to have to wonder, I wonder which employee made my product today. Which one made the lotion? This lotion is gritty today. What's the matter with this bottle? No. You need a quality control person to make sure these things are right. You got to make sure that this thing is right. You need a quality control person so that there's a standard. You got to ask them questions when you're trying to teach them. It's like, I showed them how to do it. I was there. I showed them how I was stirring the grits. You got to have some things where you have to show them. You have to show them, look, no, we stirred this 12 times. And then we check for lumps again. You have to have some very specific, concrete things, because if it can be misunderstood, it will. There's no such a thing as being too clear in your communication. But one of the things that I love about this thing, learn, do, and then teach, learn, do, and teach. God uses this gift called exposure. Exposure. Exposure is a gift. It is perhaps the most valuable gift that you could ever give a child, is exposure. Because once you've been exposed to something, you cannot unsee it. Once you've been exposed, you cannot unsee it. Exposure is a gift. God sent 12 spies over to the land of Canaan. He exposed them to a greater life. He showed them a place of possibility. Has He ever given you a dream? You ever seen something in a dream, in a vision, and it was a gift that God was giving to you called exposure? Sometimes you realize that the exposure may be in an imaginative way and not in a reality way. But you can go no place in reality that you've not first visited in imagination. So God gives us vision or dreams. God is still a God who speaks to his people through dreams and vision. He sent 12 spies over there, but only 2 got it, Joshua and Caleb. When Joshua and Caleb were exposed to this land, they came back with a report. Just because of the exposure that they saw there, they had to come back and talk to people that had no exposure. And it fired the people up and inspired the people to want to go with them and see this land. They told the people, listen, this is a land flowing with milk and honey. They learned of it. Only Joshua and Caleb learned of it. And they did something by carrying some of the fruit back from that place. It was giant, luscious fruit. And they brought it back and inspired the people. They said, look at this. Look. And then they inspired the people. It was simply because of their exposure. They'd never thought about leaving where they were until they were exposed to a better place. Until you decide where you would rather be, you're locked in the place where you are. Until you decide where you would rather be, you are locked in the place where you are. God, through the gift of exposure, that's all that he gave them, was exposure. And the exposure to that land empowered them to go back and talk to people who had no exposure. They had not seen the land. And it's one of the most difficult things in the world to go and talk to people who have not seen what you have seen, who've not felt what you have felt, who've not experienced what you have experienced, and now inspire them to want to go with you on a journey, to say, come go to a land flowing with milk and honey. We'd say it this way today, a land flowing with silk and money. It was a land of prosperity. It was a land of prosperity, and he was saying, come on and go with me to that land. Come and go, because they had learned of it. They did something about it by gathering some of the fruit, and then they took it back, and now they're trying to teach other people, you can have this. It's over here. I know where it is. Come on, let's go. Let's go. And so it got some ideas going in their head. Albert Einstein said that in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And here's the thing that I want to leave with you, that after you learn something, do something. After you learn something, do something. After you learn something, do something. And then after you do something, teach someone else to do something. And this is the essence. Learn, do, teach. Learn, do, teach. Learn, do, teach. You know why? Because you cannot lead where you do not go.
Thank you for watching Power for Living with Bishop Dale C. Bronner. Join us again next time for Power for Living, where revelation is power. Power for living.